Today, I'm delighted to introduce Erica Munkwitz. It's just over a year since Erica gave a lecture on women and equestrian sports. That was a full-length examination of women's involvement in equestrian sports over 200 to 300 years and explored the emancipation of women through sport. It was based on her book entitled Women, Horse Sports and Liberation, Britain from the 18th, 20th century. Today, Erica continues that study by looking for female subjects in our own collection or that have been on show at Palace House in Newmarket. I think it's fair to say that the examples that she will discuss have been naturally occurring. We didn't set out to collect examples of female subjects, but they have been included almost without thinking because of female involvement in country sports over the years. However, we've currently reviewed our collecting policy in recent months and explicitly added female subjects or female artists to our list of subjects to be collected. This is the 30th lecture in our series of online talks dealing with various aspects of sporting art. Again, I'd like to thank Jamie Rountree of Rountree Tryon Gallery for sponsoring this series. As I've said before, it means that we can continue to put these talks on for free. It also means that non-members and, more importantly, future members can join us. Again, we're recording this talk for future reference. I would also like to remind you that access to previous talks through the BSAT website. Erica is the professorial lecturer in modern British and European history at American University in Washington, D.C. Her research focuses on gender, sport, and empire in modern Britain, and specifically on women's involvement in equestrianism. Her work has led to a number of reports. In 2016, she received the Junior Early Career Scholar Award from the European Committee of Sports History and followed up in 2018 with the Solidarity Prize for excellence in early career equine research. And the rewards haven't stopped. She was shortlisted a couple of years ago for the Lord Aberdare Literary Prize, which is awarded each year to the British Society of Sports History for the best book on any aspect of the history of sport in Britain. As usual, Erica is very happy and encourages and wants more questions at the end of her talk. The procedure is that you use the Q&A button at the bottom right of the screen. You type in the questions and I put the question to Erica when she's finished her primary talk. So over to you, Erica.
All right, well, thank you so much, Tim, and thank you, Kate, for making the technology work. I'm delighted to be here today and talk to you about the ladies in the collections of the BSAT. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to start showing you all of the pretty pictures. All right, and just confirming that everyone can see my screen now. I don't hear any negatives, so I'm going to go ahead.
Yes, we can.
Perfect, thanks, Tim. All right, well, this is basically a who you should see on your next visit to the BSAT. And I was delighted when Tim and Kate and Sally came to me and said, would you like to talk again? And I said, of course, I love you guys. Any chance to be a part of the BSAT and have great questions from the audience is a sure win for me. So I'm excited to talk to you about 12 different images today. It is likely that I possibly missed some or that there might be some new additions. So I'd love to hear from y'all if you find anything that I missed. And hopefully I'll be able to talk about other images, as Tim said, as the ladies in the collection increase in number. And of course, Tim, I'm happy to help you get those ladies into your collection. So today we're going to start in 1738. And 1738 is this painting of Sir George Hampson and family. It's in a very unique frame. It's in this gold oval frame. And I need to also say to our guest viewing, if you need to know where these paintings are at the BSAT, on location, on site, you'll need to ask Tim and Kate because my memory may not serve for where they currently are hanging. I've always enjoyed seeing this painting when I go. It was always a little out of place, But I love the fact that you have this really elegant side saddle rider right on the right side here. And when we increase it to a more visible perspective, you can see the lavish details that are included here. Female riders were traditionally welcomed to the hunt, and those of high breeding and class rode horseback as a matter of course. Equestrianism illustrated wealth and leisure, and skill in the saddle was symbolic of power and authority. The ability to control a horse was seen as the ability to control a nation. And of course, that applied not just to men, but to women as well. And so here, for example, you see Queen Anne. Right next to her is Lady Frances riding side saddle. And one of the first things you'll notice is the red tack. It's the bridle, the martingale, the oversized saddle pad. Before the late 1700s, ladies often utilized luxury fabric for equestrian equipment. Here, this is possibly red velvet with white tassels at the rein ends and on the martingale. The saddle for Lady Frances is invisible, but 3 girths underneath the saddle pad connect it and hopefully keep it in place. Certainly, this shows wealth, rank, and conspicuous consumption. And the same thing can be said of her lavish riding habit. Her habit is green. It looks very dense and rich. It's possibly also velvet. And it has a lot of gold trimming, which would have been very expensive. In the 1700s, green was the most popular choice for women's riding clothing. And you can see that Anne of Denmark possibly set that trend just 2 decades earlier, as she also wears a green riding habit. Queen Anne was an active and enthusiastic participant in the courtly pursuit of hunting, and she served as an exemplar to other British women. Like Lady Frances's horse, Queen Anne's horse also sports red cloth tack. And although we can't see the full extent of the tack, we can certainly see a very long saddle skirt, a very elaborate martingale or breastplate, and a bridle with very elaborate reins. The saddle skirts were not just for show for these ladies. In fact, they acted much as bicycle fenders do today in preventing mud and dirt from splashing up on the ladies' expensive clothing. And I've always particularly appreciated the motto that's floating right above Queen Anne's head, which translates to, "My greatness is from on high." It was a favorite with the Queen, and I think it's also very appropriate for equestrians. So from 1738, we're going to move 10 years in the future to 1748. And this is John Wooton's Lady Mary Churchill at the death of the hare. This young lady is mounted on a gray mare, and she is thought to be Lady Mary Churchill, the illegitimate daughter of the Prime Minister, Robert Walpole. She was granted the rank of an earl's daughter by George II and later married Colonel Charles Churchill. In 1764, she became housekeeper at Windsor Castle, a position she held until 1800. Here she watches the hounds form a circle around a hunt servant who ceremonially presents the dead hare. Hare coursing was very popular, it being the pursuit of hares with greyhounds and other sighthounds who chase hares by sight, not scent. And it was typically historically restricted to landowners and nobility, those with the money and time for such sports. Here, Lady Mary also wears another fashionable green-blue habit. Depending on the light in which you see this painting, it could be either color. But you can see, even in 10 years difference from the first painting, the new military influence on ladies' clothing. There's lavish gold braiding, it looks very military, there's lots of trim. And this is because of the conflicts in America, sorry guys, and threats from the continent, sorry France, that the British were especially keen to show strength, even sartorially. And of course, the most famous instance of this influence is Lady Worsley, seen here, painted by Joshua Reynolds, who literally copied her husband's uniform. And the one thing I want to point out about this painting that I've always appreciated when I get to see it in person is what looks like a seatbelt across her lap. This, in fact, is not really a seatbelt. It's not there to keep her in the saddle, but it is to keep her skirt from blowing up unceremoniously. And just behind her skirt, you can now see a bit of a saddle seat and pad. By this time, ladies' saddles are now made of leather rather than cloth, and the saddle pad is becoming just that. We'll now move on to 1780. And though this engraving doesn't show a female rider, it certainly shows a woman and a horse. And women in the Georgian era participated in a variety of field sports beyond those with horses. Shooting and archery were especially popular. John Colet was a popular producer of satirical prints, and he strove to imitate William Hogarth, whose comedy and art he greatly admired. Now, my reason in highlighting Colet is actually not this particular image, but two others which he produced in equestrian-themed ways. So the first one, coming from 1770, is called The Female Fox Hunter. And here you see a dashing young lady urging her horse to clear a 5-barred gate. The dogs are following her, and a gentleman in the background has fallen off, unfortunately. This definitely shows that women had prowess to ride and hunt, although perhaps a little too enthusiastically in some instances. Another one of Colet's very popular images was called The Rising Woman and the Falling Man, aka Joys of the Chase. In this particular image, a woman on horseback raises her whip and jumps her horse over a parson and his fallen horse, as she follows the hounds which chase past the church. So there's a lot you can read into this painting. The one part that I'd like to look at specifically is the area in red, which in this first engraving, you can see the gentleman has come to some difficulty over the fence, but he hasn't yet fallen off. As we see in the color version though, here he has fully fallen off his horse and the lady is moving forward in a much better fashion than he. What these images show is that women's participation in horseback and in hunting was now morally and socially unacceptable. In this pre-separate spheres age, domesticity was now the surest sign of femininity. Riding and hunting, in fact, any sport or outdoor activity that took a woman out of the home was deemed to be unacceptable. It takes her out of her proper and natural place. These actions would masculinize a woman and jeopardize her reputation. And this is what leads to the decline of women in equestrian pursuits after 1800. This lack of respectability is most clearly seen in this next sketch. This was on display, and I was really happy to see this when I came over the last time. This is Alicia Thornton, Mrs. Thornton the jockey, a sketch by Thomas Rowlandson. Alicia was the mistress and quote unquote wife of Colonel Thornton. She became very famous for her horse racing, and by doing so, side saddle. In 1804, she was beaten over 4 miles at York by Mr. Flint, who was her brother-in-law, likely only because her girth loosened and her saddle slipped, forcing her to pull up. And if your side saddle is going over the wrong side, you probably don't want to keep going. In 1805, she vindicated herself. She raced again at York and won, beating leading jockey F. Buckle before a crowd of at least 30,000, and some estimates say up to 100,000. In fact, her prowess was so amazing that some scheduled races were even conceded to her without ever being run. And one thing that I truly love about this sketch is that it shows just how colorful her riding clothes were. According to the Sporting Magazine, Mrs. Thornton's dress was a leopard-colored body with blue sleeves, the rest buff, and a blue cap. So she must have been this beautiful, extraordinary spectacle when she appeared in public. But her fame was tainted. Racing for money before spectators, it was a publicity stunt. It was as bad as performing in the circus. And her reputation certainly wasn't helped by her husband, who not only refused to pay Mr. Flint for his victory, resulting in a court case, but the fact that Mr. Flint then publicly beat Colonel Thornton, with a horsewhip. There was a bit of family drama going on there. And what of Alicia? Well, apparently she ran away with her groom to France. So as the sporting magazine wrote, when a woman once mounts a racer, she will inevitably be run away with. Leaving Alicia there, we're going to move on to what is possibly my favorite painting in the BSAT collections, which is the James Pollard Coursers Taking the Field at Hatfield Park, the seat of the Marquess of Salisbury. So this painting is absolutely extraordinary. And if you have a chance to go see it, please spend a lot of time just looking at the beautiful details and the tiny things that make this so special. To give a little detail about the Marchioness, she is one of the foremost horsewomen of her age. I'll give you some highlights here of my camera close-ups, just so you can see her. The sporting magazine deemed her one of the boldest female riders in the kingdom, and in fact, the best sportsman in that sporting country. So not only is she deemed the best female rider, she's also given a masculine title of honor as well, and that turns out to be problematic. She's considered to be the first female master of foxhounds, having taken over the office from her husband in 1775 and holding it until 1819 when she was 70 years old. She also kept coursing greyhounds and a pack of harriers, and regularly hosted fields of 40 to 80 riders, including her good friend, the Duke of Wellington, which is a lot of people considering there is no national road system or transport system, and guests had to be lodged with their host. So it must have made for exciting dinner conversations. She continued hunting until 1830, when she was 80 years old. And at that point, she had to be tied to her saddle due to blindness. She followed a special groom who piloted her in the field with her horse on a lead rein. And when they reached a jump in the field, the groom would reportedly shout, "Damn you, my lady, jump!" And together they would leap over the obstacles. I just love this painting, and I love her in so many ways. And there's such great detail about her as we look closer. Here she wears a blue habit. Blue took over as the favored color of ladies' riding clothing after 1800. Sky blue was also the color of the Hatfield Hunt. And as the sporting magazine reported, Lady Salisbury and her suite appeared in the uniform of the Hatfield Hunt, sky blue with black collar and lapel and jockey caps. Here, of course, not wearing the jockey cap, but the more formal top hat with a very long white veil. You can also see, actually, okay, I'm going to go back because I have a really good quote about this. I love that when in 1827, she has a guest visiting her. She's 78 years old. She goes out on horseback. And although she apparently has none of the infirmities of her age, she had tumbled down and cut herself. And the way that she healed herself was by using horse liniment. And then she went about as if nothing happened. So you go, girl. But moving on to the blue habit, you can see now how riding dress has evolved. The riding habit of the Regency period has generally consisted of a close-fitting Spencer jacket worn over a habit shirt, often with a long skirt, and sometimes the skirt and the bodice were joined into a single garment. The habit skirt has a very long train, which ensures that her legs were covered completely and modestly when riding side saddle. To go back to the close-up of her, you can see again, the seatbelt makes an appearance to keep her skirt from blowing up. And you can see the edge of a white saddle pad just below her thigh. But what I love most about this painting is the fact that she has her eyeglass up and it's on the end of her whip. She apparently became her eyesight failed towards the end of her life. And of course, she meets a very tragic end. I won't spoil that here for anyone. But the fact that she is so keen to go hunting and go out on horseback that she fits an eyeglass to the end of her hunt whip is very cool. But as I mentioned, women participating in field sports by this time is considered risque, if not downright inappropriate. And while aristocratic women like the Marchioness likely had a lot more social leeway to do as they liked. Even they could not escape social disapproval entirely. Which brings us to our next image, the James Gilray, Diana Returned from the Chase. In this print, the Marchioness is portrayed as a classic huntress. The title refers to Diana, the goddess of the hunt, also frequently portrayed with dogs, and the quotation comes from Virgil. Here she is pictured, we can move forward, with her blue habit, but it is now torn and bedraggled. It is scandalously so, and her stockings on show are also torn. As she holds up the fox's brush, she has definitely beaten the hounds to the kill. So the question is, just who killed the fox? And rather than the female habit shirt beneath her jacket, as we saw in the previous image, she now wears a masculine collar with a thickly colored yellow scarf around her neck. You can also see around her neck her eyeglass, this time not on her whip, but on her necklace to hold it there. And it is likely, I didn't learn this until a few years ago, that Gilray copied his image from this previous sketch, this amateur drawing, which is at the British Museum. But one of the details, fascinatingly, that he did not copy is actually the blood on her petticoats. So he kept it a little cleaner than that when he made his engraving and his print. So the age of the huntress is over. The question is, when will it come again? And this brings us to the middle of the century, 1845. And you might think I've added this painting by mistake, the Pinckney family coursing at Stonehenge. Truly, there is a woman's side saddle here. She's just in the background, as women were at the time. But truly, women were never eliminated from horse sports or hunting entirely. Their numbers may have decreased, but they were always there. This painting depicts the Pinckney family. They came from a family of farmers living in a village just south of Stonehenge, so a very historic background. And it also shows that coursing and hare hunting were still popular. It especially was a less demanding activity than fox hunting, which now included a great deal of galloping and jumping, so women could still participate and watch. The oldest form of hare coursing simply involved two dogs chasing a hare, the winner being the dog that caught the hare, whether it was for sport, food, or pest control. Unlike foxes, hares don't live underground, so they don't try to seek or go to earth when they're being hunted. Instead, they like to run around in circles when pursued by hounds, so the area of the hunt is restricted and does allow much easier spectating. So the woman here, although it's very hard to see her, and apologies for the very unclear image, is riding side saddle in the very long black habit of the early Victorian era. By this point, the color of women's riding clothes had become standard black, no colors, as it is today. Skirts were very long and often made of 3 to 4 yards of cloth to create that proper drape over a woman's legs. Now, as to the saddle she's using, although we have no idea, no way of figuring out what she's actually using, could have been one of 3 types at this time. It could have been the 2-pommel side saddle, it could have been a 3-pommel side saddle, or it could possibly have been a very early advanced version of the modern side saddle with leaping head. The leaping head revolutionized side saddle riding for ladies in Britain by the turn of the century, and it's that new stability and security of seat that enables women to move from being spectators to participating in that most popular of field sports, fox hunting. Now, we're going to have a huge jump in time, so a little bit of time travel here to 1901. And this is a Cecil Alden print that comes almost 60 years after the one before. And the lady pictured here is certainly a throwback to an earlier time. It's a stylized and almost nostalgic representation that comes from a series called Old English Sports and Games. Included in this series are shooting, hunting, fishing, racing, bowls, cricket, golf, coursing, hawking, skating, curling, and coaching. Like coursing, hawking, or falconry was a popular field sport. It involved the hunting of small wild game or birds with trained birds of prey. And this, in fact, was an extremely popular pursuit for women in the Middle Ages, so going way back in time for us. And as you look at this from the Queen Mary Psalter, you can see it's from the 1300s. And you might be shocked to see that women are riding astride. It's because the side saddle or riding sideways doesn't really appear until the late 1300s or 14th century. And so I've always loved going back to these kind of images and seeing that, well, women were actually still riding astride. But that changes, as I've said. And as you can see here in this tapestry, just a little bit later, the first woman is now completely sideways, and the second woman is actually riding pillion or sideways, holding on to her male rider in front of her. In the Cecil Alden image, the lady wears a green habit, so it's very reminiscent of the women at the beginning of this presentation. And to me, she looks exactly like Diana Vernon from Sir Walter Scott's Rob Roy. So to me, it looks just like her. This saddle, even though it's a stylized depiction, is a modern side saddle. It doesn't have that offside crutch. It just has this little nub for thigh support. And it looks to me a lot like the saddle here, which is actually Queen Victoria's side saddle, today in the collections of the Northampton Leather Museum. And I was really lucky to have several opportunities to go see it and examine it here. And one thing about this saddle that makes it so extraordinary, despite its, or because of its provenance and other things, is that it has this little handkerchief pocket, and it is lined in the most extraordinary blue velvet. It's really luxurious, and you can't quite see the color here as well as I would like, but it's really something to see in person. And you can see that there is also a handkerchief pocket on that Cecil Alden image as well. So just a little detail on women's saddles that's so much fun. We're also now going to jump to perhaps one of the most exciting and beautiful horse painters of all times, Alfred Munnings. This painting is from 1924, and it is Violet McBride, his wife, Lady Munnings, whom he saw at the 1919 Richmond Horse Show. When he saw her, he was struck by her poise and unrivaled horsemanship, and he wrote, "Here was a subject to paint, a good-looking woman on horseback, silk hat and gardenia, all complete." They married in 1920. Lady Munnings frequently hunted in the west counties of Devon and Somerset, and they were renowned for their barren moorland and jagged stone walls, shown here, which made for a great backdrop to many of these paintings. Munnings wrote, "In all her life with horses and galloping across Exmoor on all sorts, always riding them with a loose rein, her falls were few." Here, Lady Munnings is depicted on Magnolia, her hunter, a mare by the 1923 Ascot Gold Cup winner, Happy Man. And she wears a green tweed habit, informal. It is only worn with informal headgear like a bowler hat, or none at all in Lady Munnings' case, as it was at the time. And in fact, you can even see a green tweed habit in Downton Abbey. Lady Mary wears one too, and you can see them at the side saddle shows today. From informal to formal, however, we move to 1930 and this Gilbert Holiday painting, which is absolutely lovely. Charles Gilbert Joseph Holiday was born in London in 1879. After studying at the Royal Academy, he began working as an illustrator for publications such as The Graphic, Tatler, and the Illustrated London News. When the Great War broke out in 1914, he continued to work for the Graphic as a war artist before joining the army and serving as a gunner. He shared a studio for a short while with Lionel Edwards, who introduced him to fox hunting. Holiday quickly became a passionate equestrian and the first artist, according to Edwards, to master the movements of horses at speed. In 1932, however, Holiday had a serious riding accident in the field, which crushed his spine and left him paralyzed from the waist down. He was confined to a wheelchair and eventually died 3 years later. This is your classic modern hunting side saddle painting. It's absolutely beautiful. The lady is certainly, using a modern side saddle with leaping head. And even though it's 1930, many women had started to ride astride, as they had begun to do before the First World War, but hunting, particularly, kept the tradition of riding side saddle alive during the interwar years and afterwards. Some hunts refused to let ladies join the field unless they were riding side saddle, which was considered proper. This lady wears a formal black habit with top hat. By this time, habit skirts had evolved into safety skirts or aprons. So if you look at the habit here, you can see the little button availability and the fact that it would actually loop around and button behind you rather than being a full skirt. This was meant to prevent skirts from becoming tangled in the pommels of the side saddle in case of a fall, and thus hopefully preventing so many of the accidents and deaths that occurred to women in the hunting field. Another jump in time to 1947 and our second Munnings of this presentation, which is coming off the heath, exercising the horses at Newmarket. Post-World War II, the change to women riding astride is very clear, as you see in the girl riding the gray horse with the pink shirt. Munnings wrote, and I love this quote, "I wish I had painted more women riding side saddle before the fashion died out. A good figure in a well-cut habit is the essence of grace and symmetry. But there must have been considerable discomfort in so riding. The passing generation gradually gave it up and rode astride. If the rider is a good horsewoman, how much better the astride seat must be for the horse." So while he's very famous for his side saddle paintings, Munnings does admit that the astride seat could be better for horsemanship in some ways. So the girl actually pictured here, we know who she is. She is Virginia Selby, later Barwell. And the Munnings Museum actually found her and did this lovely 4-minute interview with her. So apologies to Virginia for my screenshot here, but I think it's just amazing that you have Virginia with her in the painting behind herself. And here you can also see some sketches that Munning did of other female race riders, and possibly also another female in the top painting to the left. Virginia recalls in this interview holding horses from Munnings to paint when he came out to Newmarket. She recalls him as a small man in stature, but very interesting and very pleasant to talk with. She was one of only 3 girls and only 18 to 19 years old when she began working at the Newmarket stable, and also not wearing any headgear while she's riding either, as per the time. To conclude, this is one of the newest additions to the BSAT collections, and I hope I can let that out of the bag, Tim, if it's okay. This is this beautiful Lionel Edwards, an equestrian portrait. And actually, I'm very glad that it came to the BSAT because I almost bid on this at auction myself, and I totally forgot to do so. So I'm so glad that at some point I'll be able to visit and see her with my own eyes and appreciate the absolute gorgeous detail that's in this particular image. This is a classic hunting portrait. It's a beautiful horse, it's a lovely rider, and it's an inviting countryside. What more could you want? So with that, I will bring this talk to a close, and I look forward to your questions, which I will hopefully be able to answer, but if not, I am certain that Tim will. Thank you all very much.
Erica, thank you very much. I'm not sure I can answer the questions that you can't, but delighted with that talk. I think it once again shows the importance of these sporting pictures and paintings over time. They provide both a social comment and the role and changing position of women in sport. But I'm fascinated by the detail that you see in the pictures, the horse equipment, the clothing, the practice that emerges. Is it something that you've been able to use a lot in the research that you've been doing?
Absolutely. I find it absolutely critical to the research that went into my book and to also all the research that I'm doing in the future, hopefully my next book project as well. It's looking into a static image in time, so something that's stuck where it is, whether it's 1738 or 1924, and being able to see all the tiny images that make up a whole, and to being able to read into them and know more about that particular moment in time. So whether it's the edge of a saddle pad sticking out or the corner of a saddle seat that's now leather, you can see so much about what people valued and what they wanted to do, their desires, their hopes, and maybe even their dreams too. Because don't we all dream of being able to have horses in our lives?
The little bit of detail that I'd missed in the Oldham picture was the handkerchief pocket on the side saddle.
Yes, yes.
One question about Lucy Glitters.
Yes.
Um,
Surtees.
Should it have been included, or is it a missing bit of detail that we should have been listening to?
Which part? Sorry, about Lucy Glitters.
It just says, surely this talk is incomplete without mention of the glorious Lucy Glitters.
Oh, absolutely. And if you'd had an image of Lucy, I would have absolutely loved to put her in. So I think this could be an acquisition for your collections.
Do you know where we'd get one?
I'll work on it, Tim. I'll work on it.
You referred to Mrs. Thornton being a publicity stunt in her riding. A stunt on whose behalf? And is there more of a story behind that race that we need to know more about?
Certainly so. I think part of it was a publicity stunt, but absolutely behind it all is her ability to ride horses, because it's side saddle. And in fact, it's one of those early 2-pommel side saddles, which makes it more impressive that she could do a horse race over 4 miles at a gallop and still stay on. So there's absolutely skill there that should be admired and praised. But she and her husband are very fascinating people with some, well, they're a little bit shady too. And that makes them all the more interesting for us to look at. So was it a publicity stunt? Well, they are getting money from it, or in the one case, losing money because she lost. So it does have this aspect of spectacle, but also the fact that there is a woman out there horse racing. How many years before we have our first licensed lady jockey or lady horse trainer? That's a long time before we actually get it officially declared.
Yes, we did some work with the Racing Post last year. They wrote a long article.
It's a great article. It's a great article.
You've
yes.
come across it. Oh, well, they found the book that looked like a handwritten record of that race and what she'd been doing. I'm not sure of its authenticity, because I found a book that had been that had included verbatim what was in that book. But even so, it was good that they were bringing forth that story.
Yes, absolutely.
And I always feel it was sad that Colonel Thornton ended up in Paris, singing hunting songs with his cronies. And that's how he ended, with no real money. He'd hunted, he'd coursed, he'd ridden almost every day of his life, and he just ended up singing the hunting songs in Paris, down and out.
Down and out, yeah.
Well, what do you know more about Lady Mary Churchill? She'd obviously got herself into society. I thought she was a master of foxhounds, or have I misunderstood that?
Lady Mary Churchill?
Yes, going back to 1738.
So I don't know if she actually managed the hounds or not. I do know Lady Salisbury is considered the first master of foxhounds by the 1800s, because she takes over for her husband. We don't get the first official lady master of hounds until 1892. That's very much later, according to Bailey's Hunting Directory, and that's Mrs. Cheap, blah blah blah, and that's that's almost 20th century. But unofficially, ladies could be masters of their own packs, or their husband's packs, or their family packs, and they could do many of the same jobs, the same duties, take care of the responsibilities, and lead in those positions of powers. They just weren't recognized as such in print or writing. Certainly society around them at the time would have seen them acting in these ways all the time. So they would have been recognized and praised for the abilities that they had.
So you seem to suggest that there was a decline in women's involvement around the turn of the 18th to the 19th century. Was there a reason for that, or is it just a natural occurrence?
So it's one of the most heartbreaking things to me doing this research is that you have all these incredible women. You have Lady Salisbury, you have Lady Lade, who, you know, I didn't talk about because she's in the royal collection. All these incredible horsewomen who are out there hunting and doing great things. And then all of a sudden it disappears. And it disappears in the early 1800s. There are several reasons for this. One, social values change. You start to get the idea of separate spheres, that women are supposed to be in the house, not outside, not doing outdoor activities. Their jobs are to be delicate and feminine and look after the home and the children. But in terms of equestrian sports like fox hunting, this is the early 1800s, the golden age of painting the town red, for example, and it very much becomes a boys' club atmosphere of, let's say, juvenile pranks and boyish activities, literally, you know, painting the doors of the town red, doing crazy games, getting horses up second flights of stairs, trying to ride a bear in company, drinking punch out of a fox's head, all these sort of very masculine things that women certainly wouldn't have felt comfortable doing, shouldn't have been doing, and weren't invited to. And so these two tracks, one, women are expected to be more feminine, and two, hunting becomes more masculized, means women just don't have the abilities or the opportunity to be a part of these horse sports in the way they had before. What changes this? Well, there are many things. Society realizes that women can be strong and independent and do proper outdoor activities without being masculine. Two, you have the hunt community that in some ways realizes they've gone too far. And you'll have authors saying, you know, like Surtees, for example, saying, you know, actually, we do need to get women out here. They bring a gentle edge to the noble sport. You know, they bring their civilizing influence to hunting. So they're wanted in the field now. And three, you get the invention of the third pommel or the leaping head on the side saddle. And that makes the saddle so much more stable, gives women the ability to go out galloping and jumping in ways that they just didn't have before. And so when you create this perfect storm, by the 1830s and certainly by mid-century, women are back in the hunting field again.
Well, have you looked at the pictures of Herring and Fernley, those hunting
Yes.
pictures? Are women featured in those pictures, or in the way that
So
they were in the earlier?
yeah, so I love actually saying that there are side saddle women wherever you look. You just have to look for them. And like the Spode painting, there is a woman side saddle there, but she's just in the background. And so if you have a keen eye and you like to play Where's Waldo, you will find side saddle women or women on horses in every painting, almost everywhere, I like to say. In terms of the leaping head, actually, one of the images in my book actually shows a leaping head side saddle in a Herring painting from the late 1830s. So we know that they were in use very early.
Have you been up to see the Museum of the Horse?
I love Sally Mitchell.
Oh,
Sally, if you're on, hello.
oh, right. Good. I don't need to tell you about it, but there's a wonderful display of saddlery over the years, which
Absolutely. And if anyone hasn't been there, please go visit Sally. Her collection is extraordinary. And Sally, I owe you a visit if you're on.
when are you coming over next?
Whenever you would like me to come over, Tim, I will be there with bells on.
Right. Thank you for that. Well, I think we've exhausted the questions. Erica, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
It's been wonderful to work with you this time, so I hope there's another time as well.
I would happily come back whenever you like me to. And if the audience has any suggestions for things they'd like to hear about, I would be very happy to present on any aspect of my research.
And also the, I think you, as I said in my introduction, we have been reviewing our collecting policy, and we've specifically added female portraits, female activity in the sporting field, and also female artists, which I think we have neglected in the past. Sally
Well,
Bills is particularly keen to be adding new stories to in our newsletter and also into the collection. So if you come across anything or you encourage us, then we will be checking.
Absolutely, I would be delighted. And in fact, Tim, just one thing about the presentation today is that when I looked back over what I was talking about in all these paintings, you know, I'd asked you and Sally and Kate and Catherine, well, do you have anything on Skittles? Do you have anything for like Lucy Glitters? Do you have anything on the Empress of Austria? Because it seemed like when I was looking at all of these paintings, it went from pre-Victoria, missed the high age of Victorian hunting, and went right into the 1900s. So you guys might want to add something in that area, the golden age of ladies side saddle riding and hunting, like 1850 to 1910, because there are definitely some beautiful images, extraordinary artifacts, and I'd be delighted to help you find things to put in your collection.
Oh, good. Thank you for that. I think Elizabeth of Austria should be featuring in our collection. Certainly, she spent most of her time, it seems, hunting over here or in Ireland.
In Ireland, yes.
I think Catherine Field, our curator, went to a lecture that featured Elizabeth about 2 weeks ago out in
Yes,
Vienna.
absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you very much. The amount of time you've spent with us is fantastic, so thank you. I'd also like to thank Sally Bills and Kate Rogers for putting on this series of talks and making them happen. And as Erica said, if there's amongst our audience, if there are any suggestions for future talks or subjects that you would like us to cover, please tell us and contact either Kate or Sally to tell her. It's just popped up. Catherine Field says, I've just bought a Vanity Fair print of the Empress for the collection. So something
Fabulous.
So we're making progress slowly, but we're making
progress.
So thank you,
Catherine.
Thank you for letting us know as well, Catherine. The other thing I need to is for our members to remind you that we do have the Christmas cards and the Aga hot plate covers as part of our Christmas offering this year. If anybody would like details or would like to order specifically, could you contact Kate, please, or Sophie, who will be able to deal with the orders. So thank you. Our next lecture is on the 16th of January, when we will have a talk by Zoe Carmichael. Zoe, for the past 2 years, has won the BSAT Sculpture Prize that we sponsor at the annual Society of Equestrian Artists Awards. She's won for the last 2 years, and she's kindly agreed to talk to us in January. So that's January the 16th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, UK time. So I look forward to seeing you then. I hope to see you in January. In the meantime, please enjoy Christmas and the New Year. And thank you again, Erica, for your time. It's much appreciated.
You're very welcome, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.